please join me in welcoming Anne Rice to Google.
Thank you.
As we proceed, I'll ask questions of my own, but I'll also be including some questions that fans submitted to us online in advance of the event today, who I hope have tuned in to watch. And after the Q&A, we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So my first question for you, Anne, is werewolves. In my mind, they're as big a part of the paranormal pantheon as vampires, but I'm curious what inspired you to go there.
Well, actually, I had never really considered doing a werewolf novel, but I got a suggestion. Why don't I do it? From a very good friend, Jeff Easton. And I've never met Jeff. Jeff is a producer. He's the creator of the TV show White Collar on the USA channel. But Jeff and I are email buddies. I'm a fan of White Collar, and we connected, and he just happened to send me an email saying that he had just watched a documentary on werewolves, the legend and werewolf fiction, and he said, if you ever tackle that, if you ever write a werewolf novel, I will buy buckets of hardcovers. just a casual mention, and for some reason, it was just the right time for me to think about it. I wanted to return to Gothic supernatural fiction. I really wanted to get back to it, and I was stuck on a novel I was writing about Atlantis. I couldn't go forward because the science was overwhelming me, and it was turning into too much of a sci-fi thing. I mean, it was made for Michael Crichton, not me, you know. And okay, then comes this email, and I thought, well, maybe I can do that now. I mean, why not? And I started to think about it and think about what I wanted to do with the werewolf mythology and what had not satisfied me in other werewolf films that I'd seen. And within about 3 months, I think the novel was done.
Wow.
Yeah, it worked out very well. I wrote Jeff the other night after the novel came on the New York Times list at number 3 and said, do you have any other suggestions?
You know, he's a good muse.
Right.
So what about the legend appealed to you?
Well, it's the transformation, the idea that what appealed to me was, what if the werewolf, what if the man or the woman was completely conscious during the transformation? Now, the way we get it in movies and books often, the person is not conscious. They lose themselves in the transformation, become almost a rabid beast, and really don't behave like a wolf so much as they behave like a mad dog. Then they wake up the next morning and the village is filled with rumors of people being torn limb from limb in the woods. They realize they did it, and the whole thing ends with a silver bullet, you know. But I thought, okay, what if the subject is conscious? What if instead of being an agonizing transformation, this is something sensuous? I mean, I know what it would mean to me if I could grow muscles and several feet taller, you know, and get really, really strong, you know. And I thought, okay, well, that might feel absolutely terrific. And I explored it from that point of view. And my hero, Reuben, stays conscious all during it. He can talk. He can talk quite clearly when he's a werewolf or a man-wolf. And what he really becomes is a man-wolf rather than a 4-footed animal. It's more like Lon Chaney in the original black and white movie, who's always running around in his shirt and trousers.
Right.
You know. But my man-wolf does not run around in his shirt and trousers, but he's upright like this. You know, he's anthropoid, whatever. But again, what I wanted to explore was how he responds to this. What do you do the next day? You remember all of it. He even photographs himself with his iPhone, you know.
That's a wonderful scene, actually, him trying to paw his iPhone and take a self-portrait. It was very meta.
But isn't it exactly what you would do? I mean, you know, so he does it, and then, you know, emails that to his computer, and then when he wakes up, he's fully expecting those photographs to show him in a normal physical state and a psychotic mental state, and instead he sees photographs of exactly what he remembers, right, that he was a man-wolf.
And he has a really great moment, I think, early on when he's realizing his transformation and he's madly researching werewolves online, and he finds that they're really pretty one-dimensional and that his experience is so different. And were you writing him with that in mind, like thinking about how to add sort of the human experience to his wildly unexpected
Well, you know,
animal?
What I did with him was really just what I would do if it were happening to me. I would research it online immediately. You know, these are all the things I think anybody would do. Often in horror fiction, things like this are presented in such an otherworldly realm that there's no real hook into what we would actually do. You know, we go to see werewolf movies and vampire movies in which nobody seems to guess that there might be vampires or werewolves. But I wanted to put Reuben in the real world of Northern California, right in our own time, and he does. He looks up everything, and he makes the news as the man-wolf, and he is a reporter. So he's actually asked to interview one of the people that he rescued while he was a man-wolf. He attacked the rapist who was attacking this woman, and the next day has to interview her for various reasons that are explained in the novel. But I had a lot of fun playing with all of that. I mean, I think I started over 35 years ago taking the comic book image of the vampire, the man in the black cape, and getting into that character and trying to say, well, what's the real deep backstory to this? Where's the tragic dimension if the vampire is a real being? And I'm really doing the same thing with Reuben and with his being a man-wolf.
And you talk about his transformation, him being conscious through it, and it's so much more ecstatic than it is agonizing. You know, that whole American Werewolf in London thing doesn't happen, which is so different. And I think it's an example of how you've been creative with archetypes before. You know, your vampires aren't afraid of garlic and crosses and things like that. Right. But his killings are quite violent at the same time. So what's happening with him and sort of that pleasure, pain, sort of conflict?
Well, he finds he enjoys very much killing, and that though he's conscious and he's Reuben, he still has all these hormones surging through him as a beast, and he's able to kill without much hesitation. But he can differentiate between innocence and guilt when he's in that state. And he kills guilty people. He kills kidnappers, rapists, people like this, and he does not harm anybody who's innocent. In fact, it's almost impossible for him to do that. He can smell evil the way a dog smells fear, and he can sense innocence the way dogs often sense helpless people or handicapped people or people who are challenged in some way. And what he has to do when he comes back to himself is ponder whether he has the right to kill people, evil or not. You know, whether I mean, he's doing things that he can't morally forgive himself for. But it's also very alluring, and he discovers, just like the vampires in my books, that he's resilient, that he heals from almost any kind of wound. So that makes the power, the gift, all the more alluring. There's no way that he's going to give it up. And again, I was asking myself, well, what would you do if somebody, you know, gave you the capacity to be immortal and possibly immortal and definitely resilient? And I would find it almost impossible to give up.
One of our fans, Fab of Sherman Oaks, California, asked, one aspect of Reuben Golding is his ability to smell good and evil in humans. He said, I think about my pets and how they love some and nearly bite others, and wonder if that's how you got the idea. He wishes it was a character trait that we all had, to be able to sniff people out.
You know, we probably do have it on some level. And dogs have a stronger ability to sense things, maybe from physical cues and glandular activity. And I did get it from animals. I did get the idea from dogs. And I heard a story of some friends of ours that had a dog that would play very roughly in the backyard with all the kids. But when the child came out of the house that was very handicapped and challenged, the dog would go over to that child and protect it, just walk beside it into the yard. And the animal was totally transformed. Nobody had to teach that dog that. He sensed that that child was different, that it had trouble doing the things the other children were doing. And I think that went into my concept. I mean, this is, after all, a myth of somebody turning into an animal. So I was thinking, well, what are the mysterious characteristics of an animal that are going to be really preternatural to him when he goes through this?
And you mentioned earlier how you look to sort of that comic book sort of hero model, that he has this sort of this Black Knight quality. And I was wondering if you know, and as he discovers that the gift is, you know, a means to save lives and it's a means for good, he becomes, you know, with his obsessive documenting and his heroic sort of running to the rescue of people, a curious blend of, you know, Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne. Do you see some classic comic book hero in him, or there are certain stories that really came to mind beyond?
No, I was consciously exploring that dimension, that he does become Batman or Superman, you know, and how does he live with it? I mean, I absolutely love doing that. And, you know, looking again for the tragic dimension behind those images. And I've been doing it since I did Interview with the Vampire. You know, what's it like to be a vampire? What's it like to talk? And I mean, if you can get a vampire talking about it. And I think it's something I truly, truly love.
Do you think that you'll write more books in this series? Is this the first?
I think definitely, but I have other books I want to write first. I'm doing another supernatural novel, and I want to get that done first, and then maybe a sequel. I think it's a good idea to wait a little while. The sequel you would write the next day after you finish a book, it's not really the sequel you would write a year later or 2 years later. You learn things, you think about things, you see possibilities that you don't see immediately. And I want to give that little interval there. But I don't know, I never know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm looking forward right now to going home and spending the next few months just writing. And I mean, if Reuben, you know, gets into my brain, I might go ahead and do the sequel right away.
And one of our fans submitted a question about what you're working on next. She said this is Fantasy Freak of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She asked, on a few instances on Facebook, you alluded to work on a new book which appears to be a ghost story. Can you reveal any details about this exciting new book?
You know, I don't want to, because I talked a lot about that novel about Atlantis, and then I just can't make that book work. So I would just prefer to say that it's a supernatural novel, and it's in the same spirit as The Wolf Gift or Interview with the Vampire, and I'm hoping that in a few months I'll have the manuscript. You know?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I, for one, very excited for that.
Right.
So you did take a break between, you know, Interview with the Vampire, and you didn't write the Vampire Lestat until almost 10 years later.
Actually, it was 8 years later. Yeah.
And you did some books in between that. So
right.
That's a style that's worked for you in the past, and it's
it worked that time. Yeah. Yeah. It did. I had another 2 books that I really wanted to do after Interview with the Vampire, but I'm very glad that I got into the Vampire Lestat and that it worked. You know, I mean, because the Vampire Lestat's really the book that launched my career. You know, I was doing very well. I had nothing to complain about as a writer, but Interview with the Vampire was actually a flop. You know, it did not do well, and so. It was so strange. People didn't know what to make of it. And it actually had a life as a hardcover book that flopped, basically, and didn't sell. And then it had a life as a paperback bestseller briefly, and then it became sort of an underground book. And that was kind of wonderful, finally. But the Vampire Lestat was the one that sort of put me on the map. So.
And he's writ so large in that book. I mean, that's
yeah.
his debut.
Well, still love him more than any character I guess I've ever written. Yeah.
Do you have a second favorite?
Well, I'm in love with Reuben. I'm sort of in love with Reuben right now. You know, I'm always in love with the latest creation. But Lestat, I mean, he was almost more than a literary character to me. I'm almost haunted by him. I mean, I'm always thinking of what he would think of places and how he would like this hotel or that hotel or this view or what he would think. And it's, you know, I don't know. He's sort of alive inside me in a way that some of the other characters have never been, you know.
One of our fans, Artist of Ideas from California, said that my favorite book beginning of all time is I Am the Vampire Lestat. I'm immortal, more or less. And she wanted to know what your favorite first line was.
Wow. Favorite first line. The first line is the hardest part of the book. It's absolutely the worst part. That might be it. I don't know that I can top that, you know.
It's pretty fantastic.
I don't know. I mean, and that first line came from desperation. I mean, the book was done, and I just got to get into this somehow. So I went back and worked on the beginning and came up with that. Okay, just say it, you know. Good. I'm the Vampire Lestat.
And it totally captures his voice right from the beginning. That's just who he is right there. Andy, another fan, asked if you would ever consider continuing the Vampire Chronicles or going back to him.
I don't want to say no to anything right now. Yeah.
So I'll get back to Reuben, to your new favorite.
Sure.
I would love to know more about him and how how he came into view for you. I mean, he's this well-to-do, young, handsome, sunshine boy, they call him, you know, driving his Porsche up to Mendocino. Like, who is he? Like, how is he the likely or unlikely person to encounter and survive a wolf attack?
I think when you write, or when I write, I put everything I know into a character, but I really don't know how that character is going to develop. I mean, the cliche, they come to life on the page, is really true. If they don't come to life for me, I have to do another book, or the book doesn't work. But he really just came to life. Walking up this hill in Mendocino County, talking to this woman, Merchant Nidek, about her house. And I guess he really came to life when I hit on the idea that he was very good looking, but he was kind of uncomfortable with it, that he wanted to be taken seriously, and that he'd been a person who was never taken seriously because, one, he was very good looking, and two, he was fairly well off. And people tended to dismiss him as superficial, but he really had a lot to offer. And that's when he began to work for me as a character, when I began to see his frustration with that and his longing to be taken seriously, and how uncomfortable he was inside that beautiful body and face, you know. I think many, many women probably feel that way, maybe more than men, but there are probably men who feel that way too. I remember once a man telling me that when he was young, his physical looks had nothing to do with who he was, and it was very disturbing and jarring for him. And as he got older, he was more comfortable in his skin. So, but why that made that character come to life, I don't know. The character I kept seeing physically was the actor Matt Bomer from White Collar, you know, who's an exceptionally beautiful guy, I think, and also kind of unassuming and boyish, and seems to me maybe he's a bit uncomfortable being good looking, you know.
And I think what's interesting about Ruben too is that he's very, you know, he is a really dedicated to this career as a journalist, and he's an obsessive researcher.
Yeah.
He's, you know, hungry for information all the time, and I think about him in that aspect next to Felix Nidek, who's also, you know, sort of kind of becomes his sort of ancestral sort of foil, and who is also, you know, obsessed with information and history and collecting stories. And how do you see their you know, they're sort of, for me, they're the twin figures of the book, and how do you see them?
Oh, I think definitely that Ruben falls in love with the figure of Felix Nidek because he sees him as a mentor, as a model, as a man who is obviously a scholar and curious, who traveled all over the world seeking knowledge. And Ruben loves that idea. He loves that very, very much. In fact, you know, in the novel, he goes to live at Nidek Point, the house where he was bitten and became a werewolf, and he's looking for all the answers up there, but it's sort of like he moves from the family where he's so uncomfortable and so underappreciated and so much loved and dismissed. He moves up to Felix's family, basically, and Felix's house. So he chooses that path, you know. And you know what I'm writing, I don't really calculate all that, it just happens. I'm writing away and this is what happens, you know. And it was a great pleasure to write that. I think if you focus on writing what's really exciting to you and what's really intense for you, many other aspects of the book take care of themselves. Like, I used to worry a lot at the beginning of my career that I didn't put enough meaningful things in a book, that the book wouldn't be perceived as shallow. But what I realized was I was putting, if anything, too much for some people. Philosophy, theology, questions about the meaning of life and so forth. And what I came to realize is in my work, those questions will always crop up. You know, all I have to do is kind of get the characters going and into motion and get very excited and want to know what's happening next as I write, and the rest will take care of itself. But that was part of what took care of itself, his gravitating toward Felix.
And do you think that you know, the supernatural environment that you find yourself writing in, is that a more fertile ground for you to explore some of these bigger questions about faith and spirituality, these bigger existential questions? Like, is something about that world or those, you know, that identity help bring more of those ideas and thinking to the surface? It's
the only way I can explore those questions. I simply cannot write pedestrian realism. I tried. I knocked myself out as a creative writing student trying to write about experience. I couldn't do it. It was when I chose that absurd title, Interview with the Vampire, and when I started, writing through the voice of the vampire, and it was a comic book image. That's when the door opened to my reality. Then I could talk about everything that mattered to me, absolutely everything: grief, pain, good and evil, conscience, everything, tragedy, horror, the fear that life was meaningless, just a million things I was able to talk about. But before that, I was completely hamstrung as a writer, just couldn't do it. Way out of step with everybody.
And how is it for you? I don't know how much. I don't want to assume that you've read a ton of the contemporary sort of vampire fiction that's out there now, but the feel of those stories is very different from yours. I mean, they don't have that gravitas really in a lot of the characters, and which is not to say they're they're not great stories and creative and clever, but is it strange for you to encounter those sort of creatures that you know really well but rendered so differently?
Well, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
I really am. Authors like Stephanie Meyer and Charlaine Harris are doing things with the vampire that I never occurred to me to do. I never thought of doing it. I think for me, it was very important that my vampires be heroic and mythic, and at the same time intimate with the reader, talking slang, talking naturally. But they always, for me, had this glamour, this important glamour, this important mythic dimension. And what Charlaine Harris and Stephanie Meyer are doing is domesticating the vampire. They're basically saying he's the guy down the road. Yeah. He's the guy you're going to meet at Sam Merlotte's, right, when you go for a burger, or he's the guy next to you in biology class in high school, which really never occurred to me. So, and the Vampire Diaries, the same thing. Right. Vampires in high school. I mean, it's a genius stroke, but for my immortals, they would not go to high school. Right. That would be maybe the last option that they would choose, But so I read some of that with a smile, But I think I understand. The audience loves it, obviously. It's a lot of fun. And I think the concept of the vampire is so rich that we'll see even more surprising developments with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any predictions? What's going to be the next big?
No, I could have never predicted what I've seen so far, right. So I wouldn't try to make a prediction.
So without spoiling the story for those who haven't read The Wolf Gift, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about Felix Nidek and the 6 men that appear in the portrait with him at the estate.
Well, from the very beginning of the novel, these 6 men, friends of Felix's and Felix, who disappeared 20 years ago. There are maybe it's 15 years, I don't remember the exact number, but they disappeared. And they loom over the book. And there's a mystery there. Where did they go? Felix has been declared legally dead, or the house wouldn't be for sale, and Reuben wouldn't be there writing a story about the house being for sale. But he falls in love with Felix and really wants to know more about him. And to me, that was a very interesting mystery to plumb. Mm-hmm. What happened to Felix, how it happened, why nobody ever heard from him again, and I had to reveal that as the book went on. But the real subject of The Wolf Gift is really Reuben and how Reuben deals with everything that happens to him.
Right.
Yeah.
And The Wolf Gift also, I think, this is something that always appeals to me in fiction when there are wonderful names. And I think Reuben Golding is a very distinctive name, but Felix Nidek, Martin Spengler, you have these wonderful, creative, unusual names. And I wanted to ask you if, when you're developing characters, where do names fall in the process? Do you start with names, or do they come to you as you're writing? Do you have particular places you turn for inspiration?
They're the hardest part. If I don't have the name of the character, I can't get going with the character. Reuben's name just came to me. I love the name Reuben, and it seemed perfect for him. That wasn't too hard. But I often have to stop and think a lot about the other characters' names, and Marchant, I made up that name. I've never heard the name Marchant, and I made it up. But it's hard, and if you're dealing with otherworldly characters from former ages or aliens or whatever, it's very hard now to choose names for them because names have been used all over the internet by bloggers and fanfic writers and game makers and so forth. So you can't just name somebody Malchiah. You've got to go look and make sure that that's not a major game character or something.
Right.
And so it's very difficult. But I actually go to old name books. Jewish baby names are really, really good, biblical baby names. And I look through any source for names. And anytime I'm reading anything that I come across a really great name, I'll jot it down, whether it's a last name or a first name. And a character is sometimes born when I hear that name, like Margon.
That's good. It's such a strong.
Yeah, I
just
like
don't forget it. And I think I said that in the beginning. I mean, your names are really distinctive, and those characters really gel around them. And
Yeah.
do you have any names, prior names for characters now famous, that you changed mid-step, or have you always just known once you found it?
Memnoch the devil. That when I created that character, at first it was Maximilian, but it was much too ordinary a name. I mean, I love to make up a name that doesn't exist.
Right.
And Memnoch didn't exist. Lestat didn't exist. So now people were coming up at signings and showing me their baby's name, Lestat. I love it.
Wow, that's dedicated.
For about 10 years, it was pets. It was Alice Cooper had a dog named Lestat. That was great. Now it's babies. So the name is working its way into respectability.
One of our fans, Brandon of Kentucky, asks, with each of your works, your readers find themselves thrust so vividly into a richly detailed universe that loving your world and characters is effortless. Can you describe one of your favorite characters or places in your new novel and why?
You mean in The Wolf Gift?
Yes.
Well, Nideck Point, making that house. I mean, I grew up in love with houses, and in love with houses in fiction. In Dickens' Great Expectations, there's this incredible house where Miss Havisham lives, this doomed lady who's still in her bridal gown 30 years after being stood up at the altar. And Jane Eyre was a novel I loved, and there's Rochester's great big spooky house in Jane Eyre with the mad woman in the attic. And I love to create houses, and Nideck Point in this novel is sort of a tribute to me for all the great houses I came to own as I fulfilled my dreams. I lived in some pretty spectacular houses that were 100, 150 years old, and I don't now. I live in a very small, very ordinary family home where I'm very comfortable. But I had to sort of build Nideck Point almost block by block and floorboard by floorboard out of the materials of all those other houses. And I love doing that. And I love doing the origin stories, where the vampires came from, where the werewolves came from. And I love doing that in this book.
And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, because Felix has this notion about werewolves being an ancient sort of super race. And one of our fans, Ben of Salisbury, Maryland, said he loved the vampire creation mythology in Queen of the Damned, and he wanted to know if there are other origin stories that you drew upon for the Wolf's Gift, or did you just create this?
I think I created it. You never know, but I think I created it. Yeah.
Was there a particular point in history or culture that was a good springboard for you in thinking about sort of the wolf lineage? I mean, you talk a lot about these tablets and cuneiform, and there's something, I don't know, Tigris River to me about the whole.
Well, they're definitely in the book. They're searching for something, and it's never entirely revealed in the book what they're searching for. But I took the idea of wolves all the way back to a time in history when you didn't have just Homo sapiens sapiens, but you had a couple of other species out there. I can't pronounce the names of those other species, but now we've found fossil evidence that there were at least 2, maybe 3 other species of human that were also occupying the world at the same time as Homo sapiens sapiens, and we outlived the others, not just Neanderthal, but a couple of others that were different. And so I'm tracing the werewolves back to that time in history.
And how do they find themselves in the northern coast of California? What made you set your cumulative sort of dream house on in that beautiful setting?
Well, the presumption is, I think, without it ever being said, is that they're all over the world in different places. But they come to that place because it has the great North Woods. It has the great, beautiful redwood forests. And they do love being out in the forest and being beasts. I mean, when they are not, running over rooftops and intervening and tearing rapists to pieces and stuff, they also like to hunt and be in the forest and just behave like wolfmen, like beastmen. So I think that's what drew them to that part of the world.
Did you spend time there as you were writing the book just to sort of get your mind in that space, or?
No, but I had spent a lot of time there. I lived in Northern California for 30 years before I ever went back to New Orleans, and where I lived for 18 years. And during the time I lived there, we often went to the Redwoods, to Muir Woods, and to Marin County, and to places in the wine country and in Mendocino County. So I was very, very familiar with it. And right after I finished the book, I did go up and visit every single place I had written about and made sure that I had not misremembered. And I had a wonderful time, and it turned out my memories were quite true, you know, to the atmosphere and the feeling, everything I remembered. It was wonderful to go back to Muir Woods after all these years and walk again through the Redwoods. And I stayed in Mill Valley at the hotel where Reuben stays. I went to the restaurant where he meets Laura in the book for breakfast. You know, I love to do things like that. I love to go pick the sets, but it's often after I've written the book that I do that.
Was it very different for you thinking, like being in that environment versus New Orleans, where so many of your books have taken place?
Well, to me, it was a wonderful environment because it was also haunted and gothic. I mean, the idea, the windy northern coast to me is just as mysterious as the English coast is, say, in a novel like Rebecca, you know, where you have Mandalay burning down, you know, on the coast. But I found it just a great place to be. To me, the forests are gothic and ghostly. I don't feel the presence of ghosts, but I don't feel them in big houses in New Orleans either, you know. So I loved exploring that, bringing, I guess, what would be my gothic sensibility to that landscape. I'm sure other authors have done it. I haven't come across it, but I found it a natural thing to do.
Are there other locations you have in mind for future stories, places you'd like to explore?
Yeah, but I don't know what they'll be yet. I really don't. There's so many places I love, and the first thing I think about in any new place is, what am I going to write about this? Right. You know, what am I going to write about Google headquarters?
Well, you have a wonderful ability to capture the environment that you're in. I think that house and certainly those woods are character in their own right in this book, and so much drama happens there, and it's just, you're really transported right away. So I've always loved that about your book. Certainly I've never been to New Orleans, but I felt like I had been there time and again for all the times that I read your vampire books. Let's see. Before we open up the floor to our audience, I wanted to ask you a few more of our fan-submitted questions. They're here today. Tammy of Canmore, Canada, and Valley Tile of Tarzana, Canada, or California, that one. And other fans are interested in your writing process. In particular, they want to know what kind of research and preparation you do when you're starting a new book.
Well, I can do a lot of research. And sometimes way over research, because, you know, researching for me isn't just finding the answers to questions or accumulating facts or details. It's getting inspiration, and it's ideas, plots, chapters, incidents, all that spring to mind while I'm doing research. So it's a wonderful preparation for writing. But for The Wolf Gift, I didn't do very much. I mean, I researched the legends of werewolves, but I had done that before with the vampires. I had read all that material, and when I researched the witchcraft persecutions in Europe, I had read about all that. So I didn't need to go back and read very much more. The writing process, once I make up my mind to leave the dreamy, beautiful, seductive, engulfing world of research and actually get down to work, you know, and narrow down the possibilities, I write very fast, and I plunge, and the hardest part is always the beginning. It is the worst part. The first 40, 60, 80 pages of a novel take most of the time. But once it begins to flow, really begins to roll, I like to get it done in 2 months or 3 months max. I mean, if it goes any longer than that, it doesn't bode well for the book. It really doesn't. If it's done in 2 months, that's the best. That's the optimum period for me, because it's all fresh in my mind. It's all right there in random access memory. It's totally there. And if I can do it in an even shorter time, that's better. But I write all day. I usually start in the morning. After I get up, drink coffee, read the New York Times, read the LA Times, and the desert sun, the suburban paper where I live. And then I go online and talk to my Facebook people of the page, whom I love, and I usually post some stories from the New York Times, and we start talking about politics, like the Republican primary, or the war on women in America and their rights, things we're concerned about. And we get into quite a few discussions on that. And I get to work finally about 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30. And when I'm writing a book, I'll work from, say, 10:30. I'll break for lunch, go back and work all afternoon, and knock off maybe by 8 in the evening. I don't like to get totally strung out anymore, writing 18 hours straight. I get too crazy when I do that. And I knock off at 8 and usually gravitate to something that'll just take my mind someplace else. Like I'll watch a crime show, White Collar, I'll just watch something that diverts, but it's usually a narrative. I can't watch sports. I can't figure out what's happening. So I go to watch Law and Order for the 15th millionth rerun, or whatever just will divert me. And if something wonderful is on, like Downton Abbey, I'm watching Downton Abbey, or Pillars of the Earth, or Game of Thrones, or whatever, real high quality, whatever the highest quality I can get of TV. And that's my writing habit. And when the book's really going well, so that I get out of bed wanting to know what's going to happen, I will just barely do anything. I work in my flannel nightgown. I have hundreds of flannel nightgowns. And like Laura in the book, she has hundreds.
Yeah,
I have hundreds of flannel nightgowns. And I live in those gowns if I can, because it's the simplest garment. It's just a sack,
Well,
I don't
it's
have to worry
important to be
about anything.
comfortable if you're going to give yourself over to something that.
And that's one of the great things about being a novelist for me is that I can work at this thing that I'm totally engulfed by and obsessed with. It's just divine. I'm so thankful that I've been able to do this in my life. Wonderful.
Well, if you're writing these wonderful books in 2 months, I think you must have a very happy editor. She must love that you have such forward momentum. Another question from Cornelius Offdark. He says, Miss Anne Rice, would you ever write a werewolf versus vampire novel?
I don't think so. I don't think so. In the past, I did unite two groups of my people, and I'm not sure it was the best thing to do to unite them. But they do share the same world. And there's an organization I invented called the Talamasca, which is supposed to be an ancient order of people who track supernatural activity in the world. And they probably will definitely enter the world of the werewolves, but I'm not sure I'll bring all the other entities out there into contact with them. I don't think there's any reason why my vampires would have any problem with my werewolves, if they did know each other. I think they'd be fine with each other.
Band of brothers.
Yeah.
Do you ever imagine one of your own books getting that kind of Game of Thrones treatment, like seeing it and kind of dramatized that way? I mean, I know you have some experience with that.
There's not an author in the world right now that wouldn't work with HBO on a series like Game of Thrones. I mean, we all want that. We totally want that. But how many times can you call your agent and tell them that? I mean, right now, Imagine Entertainment has optioned The Tale of the Body Thief, the fourth of the Vampire Chronicles, and they're going to do that as a movie. But maybe someday in the future, there could be an HBO series of all the Vampire Chronicles. I would love it. Everybody we're in a golden age right now, I think, of costume, historical, and fantasy drama on TV. There's never been a richer time. I've never seen shows with these production values like the Game of Thrones series. I thought it was just terrific, really first rate. And I think the Tudors and Pillars of the Earth and Downton Abbey and all the different costume and historical dramas, the Elizabeth miniseries about Elizabeth I. It's just wonderful stuff. Spartacus, it's over the top, but it's great, all of that. So this is a great time for fantasy writers and writers of historical fiction. It's just a wonderful time, and I think we all dream of having our stuff done well.
So my last question for you is from one of our fans. Gerard from San Diego asks, my dear Anne, what message do you wish the reader to draw from reading The Wolf Gift?
Oh, well, first of all, I want you to enjoy it and never forget it. you know, if you don't enjoy it, forget the rest. You know, if it's not fun to read, if it's not enjoyable, if it's not exciting, nothing else matters. But I hope it's about us. It's about everything we go through, what we feel, about the transformations we experience, and how we have to deal with them. I think supernatural fiction doesn't work unless it's really about us, unless it's about our souls and our hearts and how we feel inside as outsiders, and how we feel alienated, and how we sometimes feel like monsters. It's all about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience here.
Mr. Rice, you're an unabashed follower of Christ. How much does that influence your writing?
I'm sorry, say that again?
They say that you're a rather outspoken follower of Christ. I was just curious how much that influenced your writings.
A follower of Christ? I'm not sure that I am in the way people generally mean that. You know, faith in God is very, very important to me, but I've broken with organized religion. And it was a very long, painful experience. For 12 years, I tried to be a believing member of a religion. And my break with faith was theological and social and political, and it was total. So I don't really know. I feel like all of life is a spiritual quest. I've been on that quest since I was a kid. I've been through many phases of it, and now I'm a little bit discouraged, but also perfectly at peace with knowing that I'm back with the same questions I was asking before my conversion. I'm back more with the questions I was asking when I wrote Memnoch the Devil than when I wrote the 2 novels about Jesus that I wrote. But I will say this, that writing those 2 novels about Jesus was for me a joyful experience, and I think they're some of the best writing I was ever able to do. They're not what my readers wanted, basically. They have sort of another entire readership. And I hope someday all of it will be viewed as having a continuity, because I see the continuity of the journey.
I see it too. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Rice, thank you for coming to Google today. My question is, what's on your nightstand? What's in your to-be-read pile?
Oh, actually, a book on mitochondria by Nick Lane about cells. I'm trying so hard to understand how molecular life began in the world, you know, how life formed, and the kind of strange cell life that they're still finding evidence of in hypothermic vents and things like this. I'm fascinated by all that, but I'm almost scientifically challenged. I mean, I really can't understand it, so I look to writers like Nick Lane, he's a biochemist and almost a poet of science, and that's really what I read. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of books on history. I read some books on trying to get a historical perspective on this amazing time we're in, where we are experiencing things that really the world never experienced before, like abundance and affluence for most people. And but I don't read very much fiction at all. And when I do, I generally grab up my favorite books by Charles Dickens and look to him for lessons on how to write. So anyway, Nick Lane is what's on my nightstand, definitely.
What's your favorite Dickens book?
Great Expectations, for sure. You know, the one with the big house.
Yes, of course, which you said.
And the spooky lady.
Oh, very.
You know.
Hi, Anne. Thanks for coming today. So I wanted to know how you get over writer's block.
How I get over writer's block? The only way to get over writer's block is to write through it. You have to fake it till you make it. You have to remember that you can always throw away what you're doing. You have to play tricks on yourself. You have to say, okay, just write, and at 5 o'clock throw it out, you know. And whatever you need to release yourself. Something's inhibiting you. Something's telling you you can't do what you want, and you've just got to write through it. And usually that works. And if that doesn't work, there are certain movies I turn to and certain books that almost always stimulate me and make me want to create. And 2 of the movies are Amadeus and Immortal Beloved, a movie about Beethoven. For some reason, when I watch those movies, I want very much to write. And that'll often do it. And then there are books I pick up. And they can be anything from Anna Karenina by Tolstoy to The Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer, to a Sidney Sheldon novel called The Other Side of Midnight, or The Godfather. But they're books where there's a big narrative drive and a world that you get engulfed in, and that will make me want to write. I'll get stimulated in that way.
Great. I have a follow-up question. At what point in your life did you realize that you wanted to become an author?
I knew when I was a kid that I wanted to do it, and wrote long, what I called novels, but they weren't. You know, the 25-cent notebook in 1951 probably had about 50 pages in it. But I wrote stories in the 5th grade and 7th grade and passed them around. And I lost sight of it when I went to college. Talk about writer's block. I was blocked, for, I guess, for 8 years. But I was learning so much in college that I didn't have much to write. I was absorbing. And then when I was a graduate student at Berkeley, that's when I realized that I really didn't want to pursue the PhD in English Lit, that I really wanted to just write, no matter what that meant. And I withdrew from the program to really put all my chips on writing. I'd written stuff all along at various times in graduate school, not so much as an undergraduate. But I remember that moment because it was hard to get into Berkeley, and especially for someone who had been a bad student as I had and had kind of worked their way up to the point where they could get accepted in a great program like that. And I thought, if you withdraw from this, you know, your life will be maybe filled with risks rather than any kind of security. But it was definitely the right thing to do. I went back to San Francisco State and finished up a master's in creative writing in English, and ever after really just put all my chips on writing.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hi. I wanted to know what you thought of the movie Interview with the Vampire and the casting.
Of Interview with the Vampire?
Yeah.
Well, I liked it. I was really surprised by how true it was to the spirit of the book and how excessive it was in the way that the book was excessive. So I was very, very pleased. I had never envisioned it with American actors. I had always thought it would have British actors simply because I felt that they did such a better job of articulating that they would have the quality of these European vampires, you know, that they would convey it all better. But I felt that it worked. I felt it was successful for a number of reasons. And as the years passed, I came to see that it was a very rare thing that had happened there. The producer, David Geffen, had pulled all the stops out to do it on a lavish scale and to be faithful to the book, and I was kind of amazed at what happened. You know, I would say I can't watch it because it's too personally intense for me to watch. But I feel I was very fortunate to have my book made into that film.
Follow-up question. I know there was controversy with the casting of Tom Cruise as Lestat, but did you ever meet Tom Cruise or speak to him about it?
I talked to him a number of times, but only after I saw the film. And he was very charming, very nice guy, exceptionally nice. And I was very happy with what he did. You know, could it have been different with different actors? Probably so, but I think it was very successful for what it was. It really was. It was remarkably faithful. I mean, it's a very eccentric book, very eccentric. And they really did it. And I think Neil Jordan was a very talented director, still is, you know, exceptionally talented. But I got over that casting hump. I mean, you know, what happened was that I spoke out against the casting. I was very angry about it. But David Geffen sent me an early video of the finished movie, and a lot of people wouldn't have done that. You know, that's a risky thing to do with a movie that you are going to release and you hope will make a lot of money. But he mailed me that video, and I was swept away by it, and I still had his home phone number from when we had been speaking to each other. And I called him and told him, I said, it's really terrific. And that changed everything, you know, my relationship with them. And the movie was pretty successful. It wasn't as successful as they had hoped, but it was for a long time, it was the highest grossing R-rated movie. For years, it was the highest. But
Well, thank you.
sure.
Hi, Ms. Rice. Thank you so much. My favorite series are The Witches. If you could speak a little bit to your inspiration for those.
You know, that's a complicated story. I started The Witching Hour when I still lived in San Francisco, and I only had a few chapters, and I don't know for sure where I was going with it, but something was preventing me from writing it. And we moved back to New Orleans at that time, and I ended up moving into a house, which was the perfect house for the Mayfair family in the novel, and the novel just took off. And it is filled with all of my energy and happiness at returning to my hometown of New Orleans and finding it as beautiful as I had remembered. And the novel just unfolded with tremendous energy. And it was in many ways my attempt to do a great haunted house movie. That's the idea I started with. I read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James right before I plunged into it, and I wanted to do a big dark house, a ghost that was persistent and horrifying and scary. And I think it was some of the best writing I've ever done at trying to get at the ambience of being haunted and being afraid of a vision that shakes you to the root. But so much went into those novels, The Mayfair Witches. They're everything but the kitchen sink books. I mean, everything I knew and was feeling was just going into those books. And the house, I put the house I was living in there. I described everything that was going on. You know, it was a great, great experience. I don't think those characters lived for me as much as the vampires do, but only because I felt. I guess I completed their world, in a sense. But I loved writing them.
Hi, thanks very much for coming to speak with us today. I wanted to ask about, I know you've gone through some adaptations of your works that have not been faithful to the material. Oh, what comes to mind, for example, is the film of Exit to Eden. How does that affect your writing after that when you feel that what you've done has been very misinterpreted? Does it throw you off for your future projects, or are you able to really deal with it?
No, it doesn't throw me off in terms of my writing, but it does make me much more cautious when talking with people who say they want to make a film. I mean, what I've learned is that there's no consensus amongst these people as to what my books mean. I can think the book is clear, you know, that it's all its priorities are very clear. And then they take away something totally different. You know, the people that made Exit to Eden saw it as a comedy, just a rollicking satirical comedy. They had no real interest in what it was about. And that was a sobering lesson, and of course, sometimes it's a grave disappointment, like with the movie Queen of the Damned, where there really wasn't an attempt to be faithful to the Vampire Chronicles at all there. They simply wanted to take the names and some of the ideas and make what they called a new franchise. And that was very wounding and disappointing, and that set back any effort in Hollywood to make any more movies based on my vampires. It was devastating, actually. But I talked to those people. I know what they were thinking. There was no getting through to them. You know, they had no interest in the readers. They had no interest in talking to me. You know, they simply said, we're going for a new franchise here. You know, that was what they wanted to do. So it doesn't affect my work so much as it affects my relationships with them. You know, you can take the attitude to take the money and run, or you can take the attitude to be very, very careful and try to control what happens. But the truth is, I don't think an author ever can control what happens unless you, for some reason, have an enormous amount of power. Even if you do, even if you're a producer on the project, you have a lot of power, you can still be completely overruled. You can sit down with people that are your friends, and they'll sit there and nod at everything you say, and then they'll turn around and do something so different in that movie or musical or whatever that you'll just be aghast, you know. That happens all the time in Hollywood. One great thing about being a novelist is it's not a collaborative art form. You do it all yourself, you know, all yourself. And if your editor says, I don't get this part, you can always say, well, I do, you know, shall we go to press? And usually they will. Or if she says, you know, can you make this a little clearer? Usually you can. But it's not collaboration. It's not like Hollywood where they come in and just change everything. And you have 8, 10, 12 people involved in every decision, to where there's no singularity of vision, to use Coppola's phrase. There's no singularity of vision controlling the project.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Thank you for coming. I'm curious about what got you inspired to write books like Violin.
Can you talk up?
Of course.
Sure.
I'm curious about what got you inspired to write books like Violin and Cry to Heaven.
Well, you know, I love music with all my heart, and if there's anything I dreamed of being, it was a musician, a violinist or a singer. And I don't have any musical talent at all. You know, I tried. Nothing. And those books are filled with my love of music and the way I perceive the musician as a tragic hero or heroine. And I tried in those books very much to get what the world of music was like and what music itself was like. That's what they were trying to do. And you know, to me, they're very, very personal books. They have a lot to do with what art is and what art demands of us and how we can save ourselves in art, how we can save ourselves through art. And I think the subtext of Cry to Heaven, too, is that you can save yourself through sexuality in art, even when horrible things happen to you. You can through love and sexuality and music, you can redeem yourself. You can live a great, heroic, and productive life.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I hope you'll join us downstairs in Coetzee to meet Anne and have your book signed, or if you don't have a book, to purchase a book. And I'd like to thank you all for being here today for this wonderful event.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.